We're parents, teachers, and educators, and like you, we're passionate about restoring our culture for Christ. This is Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education.
Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education. Today we have with us Jenny Bradley. Jenny, thanks for joining us.
Oh, absolutely. I'm delighted to be here talking to you today.
Jenny sent Laurie and me a book that we'll talk about in just a minute, a book that she published that is something that we think our audience is going to be really interested in. But Jenny, tell us a little bit about yourself first, personally, your family, your education, your interests.
All right. Well, my family is my favorite subject, so that's easy. I'm married to my college sweetheart, Mark, and we got 5 boys now. So ages 13 down to 4 months almost. So, and then I'm a Arkansas native, originally from Little Rock, youngest of 5 kids, and grew up in a Christian home. Just had a mom who was a prayer warrior, and that my dad was a doctor, and he actually used to pray with his patients before he'd see, during their time together. And anyway, just really blessed to have grown up in a Christian family, and just excited to have had that in my life. So
Very good. Where did you go to school?
So for high school or
College.
Okay, I went to the University of Arkansas.
Okay.
And I am Razorbacks. Yep, go Hogs. I spent 1 semester at Wheaton College.
Okay.
And but it was way too cold and I was homesick, and so transferred to the University of Arkansas, and that was probably switching from those 2 schools was definitely very different kind of a situation there at U of A. Yeah. And it was, U of A is a lot of fun, but the education wise, I couldn't have put my finger on it then, but it was missing something.
Right.
It was focused on business, practical advice, how to succeed in quote unquote the real world. But honestly, thankfully, God was good to us in that season of my life. He and my now husband were mentored by a couple, Ted and Melina Winger. He was a campus pastor. And so honestly, he taught the Westminster Confession of Faith and Romans. And those were some of the first conversations I had about predestination versus
the Reformed faith, yeah.
Yeah, and so honestly, I look back at that time as kind of redeemed. My education at U of A is redeemed by the informal education through the church, which was really neat.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've come to us. We've become familiar with you, first of all, because you have been a wonderful customer in various things. But you sent us a book that you wrote, and that captured our imagination. Tell us a little bit about your writing. What is it that you've produced? What is it you've written? We're going to talk, of course, about this book that is about a Shakespeare book, A Midsummer Night's Dream, in just a minute. But tell us more broadly about your writing. What has motivated you to write?
Well, it's a little bit of a long story, but essentially we had it was a labor of love because essentially our homeschool group got together and we wanted to do a Shakespeare play, and the idea was to do Henry V, because at the time we were all getting together for like a Middle Ages Reformation studies, and we were studying things like Beowulf and Robin Hood, and actually, honestly, I got a lot of things from Omnibus 2 and found kids versions. Yeah. And we were studying these things, and so I thought, okay, we'll do Henry V. And then we ended up I was like, let's do, maybe 2 weeks on a Midsummer Night's Dream and just see how that goes. And so what happened was that the kids begged to do a Midsummer Night's Dream instead of Henry V.
Okay.
And at the time, we were in the middle of baseball season. I had 3 boys playing baseball, and we had 6 games a week. And I didn't think I had time to write anything, but the kids begged to do it. And you hate to turn kids down when they want to do something like that. And so the result was that I started writing it at home for our group to perform.
So you wrote a play of a Midsummer Night's Dream because it was something that just wasn't available otherwise.
That's exactly right. Well, if you get on Amazon or something and you search for a Midsummer Night's Dream, like a kid's version, that's doable. And I say that because obviously the real thing's out there. It would take you about 2.5 hours to perform, though. It's not exactly accessible to kids.
For a
little
grammar
bit
school
long.
play.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom was like, I would never have watched that.
Even her grandchildren?
Yeah. She's very honest.
Yeah. Well,
So-
that's good.
Yeah. So I looked, and everything was modern translations. And so it was conversational language. They had taken Shakespeare's words and changed it so that it sounded like we would speak today. And as someone who loves literature, this was a travesty to me.
That's not going to cut it.
This is not Shakespeare. Shakespeare is the language.
Yeah.
And so I knew I wanted to preserve as much of Shakespeare as possible,
Right.
preserve the story as much as possible.
Right.
And I have to hand it to my editor, Amy, really helped me shape it too. She helped me add in some parts that she was like, I really think this is important, and I think what Shakespeare's doing here, we need to see that. So
Yeah.
it was nice to have her
So
help.
you're taking the entire play and you're prioritizing the things that are significant in it, but you're also wanting to make it tighter and manageable by a younger crowd, a grammar school crowd. My dog's a little excited here this morning. And there wasn't anything out there to do that. So you do, frankly, what we've done. If it's not there, you have to make it.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
What were the things that were available, and what were you able to kind of work off of?
I used the original script, and I used I read through Leon Garfield has I think it's, let me see what it's called. I don't have it around here somewhere. Anyway, he wrote some Shakespeare stories. And so to me, I wanted to make sure that we had narrators explaining parts of the story that were missing. And so I read through that and sort of tried to think of it. Okay, this is somewhere in between. If you're familiar, E. Nesbitt wrote some short, beautiful Shakespeare stories for kids.
Okay.
And they're real short.
Yeah, at the moment I'm not recalling.
Okay.
But it does sound familiar.
Yeah, they're too short. There's too much missing. And then Leon Garfield, they're pretty long, and they don't include the lines from the actual play. They do a few, but I wanted something that could actually be performed on stage. Or there's also, I wanted it to be something that kids could download puppets. My publisher has puppets on their website that you can download, and you can glue them on popsicle sticks, and you could have your own little family get together with your popsicle stick puppets and do this play. So that's what I tried to do.
Well, you're really filling a niche that's my kids can do more than this, but not quite the whole thing.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and what I'm so I can sort of hear in my, you hear the kind of the argument of like a Shakespeare purist who would say, no, you gotta do the whole thing. You gotta do the whole thing. You can, wait until they're older even. And to me, I have these kids and I want them to be able to have a version that they can do young. I want them to be able to actually play Shakespeare. And it's called a play, but we put it kind of in the theater world as, okay, it's got to be perfect, and you have to have everything all together before you can attempt it. And children learn a lot through play. And
Absolutely.
so
We're very much in favor of meeting children where they are with the good things of our culture in order to have them love the full amount if they can't
right,
fully appreciate it initially.
right,
We created a phonics curriculum called the Phonics Museum. One of the things that was important to us was to get children reading a book as quickly as possible. There's curricula out there that doesn't have children reading until 6 months or later into the process. And it's counterproductive to the motivation of the student, which is what we're after to begin with.
right.
And I think you've seized on that well.
Right. And I like to say that I made it for amateurs, as in, I love basketball, but I'm not going to go tell a pro basketball player how to play basketball, right? And someone who knows Shakespeare and can knock it out of the park and, goes to the Globe theaters and, in their area and performs it, they might say, okay, this is amateur stuff. But I actually embrace that because amateur comes from amare, to love. And so this came out of a place of love, a love for the kids, a love for Shakespeare. And I really just want it to be for people that want to love Shakespeare, or do love Shakespeare, or, for the child that was, if I had been a fifth grader and had gotten my hands on this, I would have totally printed out puppets and made my family watch me produce my own little play.
Yeah, that's really neat. So you've kind of answered why you're doing this. You're filling a niche that you saw was not filled. What else are you planning? This book, A Midsummer Night's Dream, how would you say it targets third through sixth grade?
I would say it's ideal. Our kids actually were like 8 to 12. I think you could go all the way up to 16, especially with homeschool groups. I would think if you're 17, 18, you might find it too childish, but maybe not. I think it just depends on the scenario.
Yeah, we've seen tremendous value in theatrical production of grammar school kids. And that's where I would really, 16 or 17 sounds a little old. I'd think they're ready for the whole thing there,
Right.
and that sort of thing. But these grammar school kids getting into it, I know one of my children ended up in the theater world in a number of ways, including professionally with some of the things he does on both sides of the camera, because of some of the theatrical things that his teachers did with him in grammar school.
Yeah, that's neat. Well, and we had a young lady, or at least she's a young lady now. At the time, I would have called her a little girl, but a few years have gone by. And when she first started saying her lines, she looked absolutely mortified. Like she just did not want to be there at all. Especially because there's a few, I'll call them lovey-dovey lines. And she just looked like she wanted to hide. And yet by the end of the 6 weeks that we worked on it, she came alive and she was this like strong actress that got into it. And then the next year when we did a different play, she was actually hero Much Ado About Nothing, and she's swooning and fainting, and you know, and now her mom was just telling me this week, because we're about to do Julius Caesar this coming semester. She said this is her thing now. Like let her. She would love a lot of lines.
Yeah.
And she, you know, and then she was actually asking me, like, do we know what the parts are yet? So here you had this little girl
Yeah.
that was like embarrassed and didn't want to do it, and now she's all in. So
Yeah.
that's fun to
Well,
see.
that's a very important thing. The
Yeah.
whole idea of developing children in their communication, in their articulation, in their rhetoric. You know, we study rhetoric in classical education, really in the high school years, but there's a lot that can be taught with getting comfortable with your own skin and your own expression
Right.
early on. And you've just really, I think, identified a very important opportunity that parents can have doing these kinds of things that you're helping with. What else is on your
Yeah.
list of
Yeah, it's
to-dos
fun.
in this? You have described to me on the book cover. Obviously, it's Shakespeare's
Uh-huh.
A Midnight a Midsummer Night's Dream, and then
Yeah,
you
it's a
have Kids on
mouthful.
Stage. What's the significance of the Kids on Stage brand you've put on it?
The Kids on Stage is so it'll be a series. And so, like I said, we'll do another Kids on Stage for Much Ado About Nothing. And then we'll do Julius Caesar. And those are the only ones I know so far. I sort of take it a year at a time and try to decide. I told my oldest group of kids this week, I was like, what if we did Romeo and Juliet next year? And they were like, no, please, no. And I'm like, but it's so good, guys. And anyway, so we'll
Yeah,
see.
yeah, that's funny. That is funny. So you're differentiating yourself from what exists by saying they're not ready for the whole thing, but what exists is a little dumbed down. It's not true to style. And we really, one of the values of writers like Shakespeare is feeling his vocabulary and
Yeah,
the sophistication of his language.
right.
How does
Absolutely.
that fit with the third grader and the fifth grader that you interact with? How do they
Well,
relate to the language? What do they say about it?
oh man, honestly, I think they they are a little bit, you have to go through it several times, and explain, hey, this is what he means here, but by the time they actually perform it, they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And so, I'll read you a line here. We had a little boy that played Lysander, and he's not little anymore, but he gets to this part and he falls to his knees and he says, I do repent the tedious minutes I with her have spent. Not Hermia, but Helena I love, who will not change a raven for a dove. The will of man is by his reason swayed, and reason says you are the worthier maid. So anyway, I mean, he nailed it. And it was, he's pleading with this, woman, she's not a woman, but, in
Yeah,
the
I understand.
character wise,
They're
uh,
acting.
to follow, that his reason is swayed, which is ironic because he's under an enchantment at that point.
Yeah,
Which I
that's
just love
funny.
that Shakespeare's taking those topics, is love an enchantment? Is it reason? Not that we necessarily get in with that with the kids, but it's just, it's fun I would love to have had like the moms get together and talk about the actual play and read through that play
Yeah,
together.
yeah.
Would have been fun to do.
That would be that's
We're all
another thing
busy
you can
moms,
add
so
to
yeah,
your process
maybe this year. This
as
is
you
our
produce
year.
a play. One of the things that has stood out to me in classical education since literally the first year of my involvement. I remember in 1992, a very talented baseball player loving literature and things like the theater and that sort of thing, the world in which I grew up was one where the jocks were kind of here, and the theater group was kind of here, and the band group was in a different place. And partly because it was impractical to do multiple things sometimes, because all of them are fairly consuming, but also partly because different things are cool for different people. Partly because um, uh, it wasn't practical, but also partly because I don't want to be part of that group.
Yeah.
And I hated that as I looked back on it, because I remember my music teacher trying to encourage me to be part of the choir. I'm kind of loud, I have a big voice, and she thought I could sing well enough to do that and thought it would be good. And I didn't want to do it because it wasn't cool in the sports group that I was a part of. But in classical education, and I loved hearing you say, 3 kids playing baseball and now they're doing this,
Right.
and they're doing both. And I think that classical education has been uniquely positioned to encourage appreciating the beauty and significance of multiple, relatively unrelated categories. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that homeschoolers and classical schoolers are in a unique situation in that you have a lot of values coming from home, as in we had a family that was very familiar with Shakespeare. And so when their boys found out that we were doing this play, there was instant excitement. Well, you got 3 boys that are, these are middle school boys excited about Shakespeare. Well, that's contagious. And so everyone else is sort of like, what, we don't know what if this is cool or if this is not cool. They're like, oh, this is apparently it's great. And so I think, they're actually a big Veritas Press family too. And
Wonderful.
they watch a lot of the movies at home, and their family just loves it. And so they actually kind of brought that to the table, just that excitement. So that's
Yeah,
neat.
it really it takes us past some of the silliness that comes out of peer pressure. And I love that aspect of what you're doing here, making Shakespeare cool, everybody. I'd say I would call that a real differentiating aspect of what you're doing, of what classical education does. What other cultural influences are you seeking to have as you think about uh, kids on stage? I had to look it up again.
Yeah, you're fine.
And how you want to influence the marketplace.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I was actually just listening to a podcast, The New Mason Jar with Cindy Rollins, if you're familiar with that. And she had on a guest named Dr. Jason Baxter. And they were talking about just this problem with the obsession we have in our culture with technology. And so you got video games and you got social media and you got kids on their phones all the time. And Dr. Baxter was saying that his concern is that we're reducing our language down to just Instagram and Facebook emoticons. And so what does it mean when we like cat memes, but we also like our pictures of our families and, that kind of things, or we love them, or, we've reduced it down, and where does that leave us, with our language when it's reduced down like that? And so to me, Shakespeare is the opposite. It's the expansion of language,
Right.
like you were saying, that the kids, how do they deal with the language that they don't know? Well, hopefully all of us are still encountering words that we don't know as we continue to read and continue to learn. And yes, we have the internet. So there's this idea of, oh, you don't have to learn anything anymore. You can just look it up on the internet. And yet that denies the fact that we are image bearers, you know, and we are created for more than that. We are created to know things because knowledge is good, because our creator gave us that desire to know him and to know creation. And so, you know, hopefully this play is points kids towards Shakespeare and points them to expand their vocabulary, expand their language. But that's not the end of it. It's that, what does that mean when they expand their language? That hopefully that they can express themselves better in life, and that they can have deep thoughts. And honestly, I told one of my sons, I can't remember what he was saying. He didn't want to read, you know, something that I wanted him to read. And I said, well, I respect you too much to not have you read this, you know? And he didn't necessarily appreciate that. But, you know, if you say, he's a young man, look, I respect you. This is for your good, you know, even if you feel like it's not.
That's really a good place to leave things here. Developing the language abilities of the children is an important part of what we do with them. My dog needs some more language too, apparently.
And they have those buttons now. My son tried to tell me dogs can talk now, and I said, those buttons are not the same thing as talking.
Well, this is more of an interruption he's provided in anyone previously, but the circumstances kind of required it today, so here we are. But I really appreciate what you're doing. I want to encourage you. I want to encourage our listeners to really think in terms of the value of theater and what you're doing to help them out. And thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.
And folks, thank you again for joining us at Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education. We hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.